Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Tips and Tricks for Leveraging Drone Tech for Optimal Earthworks Project Management, brought to you by GPS World Magazine and our sponsor of this event, Propeller Aero. Before we get started, I want to let you know that you are in a listen-only mode and today's webinar will be recorded. A recording of this webinar will be posted to gpsworld.com/webinars and will also be emailed to you tomorrow. At this time, I'd like to acquaint you with the ways in which you can participate during today's presentation. Please notice the Q&A panel at the left-hand side of your console. If you have a question, type it into the panel's text box, then click Submit to place your question in queue. We encourage you to ask and enter any questions you may have for our speaker during today's presentation. We will address these questions at the end of the webinar during our Q&A portion. Questions submitted during registration have already gone to our panelists and may be covered during the presentation. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, you may use the same Q&A panel on your screen to submit your issue, and someone on our team will personally assist you. You may learn more about our speaker by viewing his bio, photo, and email address in the panel located on the upper left-hand side of your console. If you are logged into your social media accounts, you can share the webinar's title, description, and URL with your friends or colleagues using the Share This widget you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Finally, at the bottom right of the console, you will find a PDF of today's presentation slides, which you can download, and a link to visit the Propeller Aero website. I'm Mackenzie Shoemaker, Content Marketing Producer for GPS World, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. I'd now like to introduce you to today's speaker. We'll be hearing from Matthew McCullough, Senior Account Executive at Propeller Aero. Matthew brings with him 5 years of technical experience in the civil engineering space to better help customers understand issues and alleviate them moving forward. At this time, I'll pass the presentation over to you, Matthew. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction, Mackenzie, and thank everybody for attending today. As Mackenzie mentioned, I work for Propeller Aero. We are a drone software company, so we're responsible for processing the data. So I'll go ahead and dive into the agenda for today's webinar, as well as just a few things that we'll cover moving forward. So first things first, I'll make an introduction to Propeller, and then we'll kind of get into what happens when the expectations and the reality don't align on Earthworks projects. Then we'll talk about the benefits of drone technology, and then we'll get slightly more personal in terms of what Propeller can offer. Then we'll do a live demonstration of the platform, and as Mackenzie mentioned, finish with a Q&A. So first things first, this introduction to Propeller, we build hardware and software that simplify data capture and processing, as well as analysis for survey and project management teams in the civil and heavy civil and resources space. So our solutions, which you can see here, are Propeller PPK and Aero points, which is our actual data collection solution, the Propeller platform, which is a data analytics platform that we've built, and then Crew, which is a mobile-friendly function that we can use beyond there. And we'll cover all of these moving forward. So in terms of who we actually work with and kind of what makes me qualified to speak to these things today, we serve earthwork and construction professionals in these main 4 verticals. We also work significantly with surveying and engineering teams, but at this time, Propeller's been around for a little over 7 years, and at this point, we have more than 4,000 companies globally. We process well over 100,000 surveys and are on around 25,000 active work sites in more than 120 countries. So now we'll actually get into the subject matter of what we're discussing during today's webinar in terms of expectations versus reality on a project. So what happens when they don't match, and how can you gain alignment? So one of the single biggest things that we see as we're talking to prospective customers and end users is there's a number of limitations that come about from traditional surveying methods. So as I'm sure most of the people who are in attendance today realize, traditional surveying techniques involve a basin rover or a total station to collect site information, and it can be super labor and time intensive. I'm actually working with a customer right now who does a lot of solar and wind farm construction, and they have a site in Texas that's around 2,500 acres. And they were telling me before they started implementing drones that it took about 30 days of survey work So they were able to cover about 80 acres a day using an ATV and a rover to get updated site information. And using the specific drone that they do, they're able to collect that same amount of data in about a day and have it processed in roughly 24 hours. But in the event of things like this happening, especially on these larger sites or these sites with a significant amount of change happening, typically teams are working with older data, which can cause a communication breakdown and adverse project consequences. So what we've found in the years we've been working with our customers at this point, these are some of the most common things that end up happening. So timeline delays, just discussed. A lot of times you're waiting for significantly older survey data, or it may be taking days to collect data that you need pretty much immediately, which can lead to communication breakdown, difficulty with material sourcing. As you're staging your project, you need to know how much material you have available to you on the site, whether that's for road construction where you may need sub-base or subgrade material, or whether you just have enough to balance your project, which can lead to frustrations within the project management team, as well as your clients, incomplete project milestones, as well as delays, reputation damage, and things of that nature. So how can we use drones to solve some of these issues? So some of the benefits of drone surveying are obviously survey sites quickly and more frequently. One of the very first surveys that I did when I started with Propeller about 3 years ago now was a residential subdivision build out here in Colorado, and it was roughly 300 acres. And we were able to fly the site in 53 minutes and get an extremely accurate survey. And kind of to the same tune that we were talking about earlier, we were, the customer who we were working with at the time said that survey typically took them about a week on hand. It was a lot of overburden. There were dangerous areas to hike in and out of as they were excavating and things of that nature. So it was a huge success story for them. Better project tracking and improved project oversight and visibility. I think these two things go hand in hand. What the drone is capable of getting for you is both visual representation and topographical representation of what is happening on your site, which can make it much, much easier to kind of communicate those changes and enhance communication and collaboration as the project is going on. Reduce disputes and conflicts, I think, goes hand in hand. If you're able to survey something every single day or multiple times a week or even once a week that typically you'd only be able to do on a monthly cadence or quarterly cadence for some of the projects that our customers are typically working on, and you can now do that much more frequently, you can reduce those disputes. You can ensure that you're getting paid for the work you're doing, or that your client is up to date with everything that you're doing on the site. You can avoid safety issues. As I was saying, if we have any people who are surveyors on the call, as I said, I used to work on several civil engineering projects. That was my role for several years. And so I worked very closely hand in hand with our in-house surveying team then. And it was very difficult for them to survey certain areas without putting themselves at risk, lots of sprained ankles and things of that nature that can be entirely mitigated by the drone. Mackenzie mentioned the Q&As at the end, but one of these I think is really worth touching on as we're discussing here is that the accuracy that we see with the workflow that we recommend is typically 1/10 of a foot or less. So it's dependent on the drone that you're looking at and using, but there's a lot of the expectations and reality of what is capable of drone surveying have finally intersected over the last couple of years, and you're now capable of getting really, really impressive results from a drone, typically even better than what you'd see from a traditional survey because there's much less interpolation going on. So this is actually, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have some personalized things in this slide, and this happens to be one of them. So one of the drones, the ones that you saw in the last images in the last slide that we recommend, is the Phantom 4 RTK from DJI, and we actually introduced to the world a little over 3 years ago now. We were just celebrating the 3-year milestone of Propeller PPK. And what this is it utilizes the RTK sensors on a handful of drones that we've partnered with, along with our smart ground control points called Aero points. And it's a super simplified data collection method that minimizes the time in the field. We found that one Aero point, when you use this drone, is sufficient for up to 100 acres, and there's no additional ground control or checkpoints required to ensure that level of accuracy that we're claiming there. Obviously, if you want to use more, you certainly can, but it's made it so much easier to collect this data frequently and ensure accuracy time and time again, as well as being extremely affordable. So the benefits of utilizing Propeller PPK are obviously less time spent in the field, less ground control on the site means that you're really, you do not have to go all around the site to shoot in checkpoints or, place pads or whatever the case may be. You can just utilize the one, and then every other piece of ground control on the site that you're using or that you may not be using can be corrected off that single one. Verifiable survey grade accuracy. We produce processing reports on every single one of these. And then if you actually process through our system as well, it's drag and drop processing. You put in the raw imagery as well as the metadata that was contained with that imagery, upload it to us alongside the Aero point information that has been collected. And from there, we process the data and return it to you, return a working 3D model of your work site to you. And then from there, we have 24/7 expert support from our hardware and software teams. So as it says here, unlimited support from a personalized team of highly skilled geodetic experts. So I think at this point we have about 36 data success team members who are all masters in all master's degrees in GIS and survey and things of that nature. So really well qualified to produce the to not only help you guys collect this data, but also to analyze and produce the results. So what this looks like in the field for users is we've got this neat little infographic, but first things first is you'll place and activate your Aero points. What these are 2 foot by 2 foot foam pads that are equipped with a solar charger and an L1, L2 GNSS receiver. So place it on the ground over a known point or an arbitrary point if you're working in state plane or a published coordinate reference system. Turn it on. One button operation, super straightforward. It's going to collect its own location information in real time, minimum of 10-minute collection time. You fly the drone concurrently while the data is being collected by the Aero point. You then upload the Aero point data, upload the drone imagery, and within 24 hours, we will process that imagery into a working 3D model of your site. From there, you can view, analyze, measure, share the data using our platform, which actually is a perfect segue into this next little bit. I've recorded a demonstration of a lot of the tools that and tricks of the trade that we're able to use based on a lot of the things we discussed in this webinar thus far. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to this video for the next 15 minutes. So up to this point, we've discussed a lot about how drone surveying in general can benefit surveyors and contractors and people who are tracking quantities and things of that nature for projects. But I figured now might be a good time to actually dive into the Propeller platform, who I work for, a little bit more and showcase how some of these platforms can make you guys more efficient and effective by utilizing drone survey. So first things first, and arguably one of the most important features, depending on who you talk to, is that this is entirely web-based. And what that means for your organization simply is that you can share this with any number of people within your organization, outside of your organization. It does not matter. No need for a share point, no need for anything of that nature. Any number of people can be invited to this platform. The second thing is that this is set up to almost act as a surface repository. And what I mean by that is virtually any form of survey data, whether that's an engineered topo that has been done by people in the field by hand before the project's cleared, whether it's a LiDAR survey that was done years ago by the state, or whether it is a drone surface, we can bring all of that data into the platform as well as any design surfaces that you have available and implement all of those and incorporate all of those in order to keep everything in one place. So we have stories, we have users who have hundreds of individual users on a single platform, and what it allows them to do is just ensure that the project teams, everyone from the estimating to the surveying to project management and operation, are all on the same page at the same time. The second thing that I think is worth showcasing here, and this is something, whether it's a project owner or whatever the case may be, regardless of who you're sharing this data with, this timeline tool allows you to very easily visually represent the changes that are happening on site over time. So you can see that this particular customer had about a 3-week cadence between surveys, and this February 28th is how they left the site. So not only does drone surveying provide you with a really, really accurate topography of your site, but it also can provide you with up-to-date aerial imagery, which I know in many cases, whether it be weather events or things of that nature, can provide you with a really solid peace of mind that you left the site in a certain way, and you can prove that to the people that you're working with. Now, I know that this is a GPS World webinar, and I know that there are probably a number of surveyors on here. And a lot of times when I speak to survey teams or survey managers, one of the biggest questions is always like accuracy. How is this nearly as accurate as what we have been doing up to this point? And this is one of the things that I love showing off for people who have that question. So within this survey tab, we have a handful of things available to us for the layers of this map. So what you're looking at right now is a digital terrain model with an ortho photo draped over the top of it. If I turn on the point cloud, however, it will show you just how many individual points were used to create this point cloud. And so if I actually zoom in on some of the more incorporated areas of this site, like let's say this stockpile here, you can see from a certain angle that it practically looks like a photograph. And so on a site this size, which is about 50 acres, this actually has about 59 million individual points that were used to create the surface. I used to be an engineer, and I used to work with our in-house survey department really frequently, and I can assure you that no one's taking 59 million points to create an engineered topo on any sort of site. So going back to some of the tools that are available to you guys and to the people that are utilizing this platform, if I turn the point cloud off there, since this is about earthwork and progress tracking, I'll keep it pretty limited to that, but I'll show you just how simple and easy it is to utilize drone surveying to track those sort of things with this platform. So we have a number of measurement templates that we've already created, and most of them apply to 3 different things. Point, line, and polygon, similar to what you'd see in any CAD program, but the most popular ones are used to track progress. And so for the purpose of this measurement, I'm going to select Compare to Previous Survey. So once I've selected my template, I will simply click to start the measurement. I will create my boundary, and I will click around. Everything is click to start, double click to finish. And within a matter of seconds, I'm going to get the volumes on the left and a cut fill map on the right. You can see that we're comparing the 24th of January survey to the previous survey. But we can actually come in here and compare to any of the previous surveys as well. It just so happens to be comparing to the 2nd of January. So the way this reads is in that 3-week time span, this particular contractor had cut about 5,430 cubic yards, filled 4,963 cubic yards for a net removal of material on this area of about 467 cubic yards. If we actually take it one step further than that and hover our mouse over any of the active areas on this site, you'll see that any of the areas of red are displaying the amount of cut that happened in that specific area. Any of the areas that are blue are displaying the amount of fill. And anything that is showing up as clear is showing up actually as on grade, meaning there wasn't a sufficient amount of cut fill that happened in that area based on the parameters that were set beforehand. So discarding this measurement and moving on to some of the additional functionality. So as I mentioned before, when I was talking about this being a surface repository, we have the capability to import a number of different file types into the platform using this import a design function. So these are the different files that are available. They can be uploaded in DXF, TTM, IFC, KML, KMZ, or LandXML. Most common for our customers, I would say, are DXF and LandXML. But it's simply a matter of dragging and dropping those files. We have the capability to process in both projected coordinate reference systems as well as local coordinate reference systems. So regardless of how your site's been set up, your files are going to line up apples to apples, and they're going to drape perfectly over the top of what you've imported into the platform. So once that is in here, we can turn on any of these measurements. So if I click this final grade design, we actually have a state lot plans in here. And you'll see if I turn these on, we're going to get all of the points, lines, and polygons that have been provided by this design file. And what's really cool about this And something that's pretty unique to us is that if you hover your mouse over any of these measurements and right-click, anything that was created as a polyline in that CAD program is going to be converted to any of our polyline templates, which you can see here. And anything that is a polygon can be converted to any of our polygon templates, which can be seen here. So in this particular scenario, I'm just going to take this compare to latest design, and I'm going to use the boundary that I just converted from that measurement in order to create our new measurement. So if I come back into the Measure tab now, you'll see that the measurement that I just created is turned on now, perimeter polyline, and I can come in here and select the design that I would like to compare it to. We've already selected our finished grade TTM in this case, so what we're looking at here is a cut of about 35,000 cubic yards, a fill of just under 46,000 cubic yards. And what that means is we need a net import of material of about 11,400 cubic yards to balance this site from here on out. If you wanted to create this measurement and have it display time and time again as you're continuing to upload more to this site, you could call this compare to design, click save, and then click this button to either promote this to site level, which will mean this measurement shows up each and every time you upload a new data set to this platform. You can duplicate it in this data set, which will allow you to change the vertices, or you can copy to another data set, which will allow you to edit that measurement accordingly. It's not limited to the entire site either. You can, the importance of bringing in the line work is you could make it as granular as you wanted, from a single building pad all the way up to the entire site, like what we're looking at here. And what's really cool about this platform and platforms like this is the capability to measure this information quantitatively and then get it into the hands of other people in the field. And so I'll show you a little bit about how to create a measurement report here. So if we wanted to turn on a handful of the stockpile measurements that were created, if we wanted to turn on any of the whole site measurements that are available, whether it's original ground to finished grade, in this case I'm going to grab the billable quantities, we'll just turn those measurements on, come into the Reports tab, and generate a measurement report. Now this takes a few seconds, so you just simply click Download Full Report, and once the report is rendered, it's going to give you a handful of different things to look at here. So it's going to show you who the report was generated by, what the name of the site is that you've created here, when was it surveyed, what is the projection, aka the coordinate reference system that's being used, when was it surveyed, and when was the document generated. And then you're going to get a legend of exactly what we're looking at here on the site. In this particular case, we turned on a handful of stockpiles as well as the billable quantities for the site. So you're going to get this measurement. One of the things that's really, really impressive about these reports that we generate is that this is a live PDF, meaning if I were to click into this link, it's going to take me right back to this exact measurement within the platform. And so once you've established who has access to the platform, by sharing these reports, you're giving them the information they need to go and see this information themselves and understand where it was derived from. Then it's going to give you those exact same volumes that we showed earlier, as well as a gridded cut fill map of what is required on average in specific areas to get to that finished grade. And then we have a number of stockpiles here where we can actually apply material characteristics and things of that nature, which will allow you to ensure appropriate project staging throughout the life cycle project, ensure that you're being paid for the correct amount of material, or in some cases, if somebody else is importing that material onto your site, ensure that you're getting the amount of material that you've paid for. Another extremely valuable thing, I think, from a surveying, engineering, and project management standpoint, is that each and every data set that we process on our end, we actually generate a number of file types for that are available for export. So if we come into the 3D model, we have DXF and TTM downloads in several different densities. 1 and 2 foot contours are available. Orthophoto in both GeoTIFF and JPEG format are available. Full density and reduced density point clouds are available. And then finally, digital terrain models and digital surface models are available as well. So really easy to bring files into the platform, but it's also extremely easy to bring surface information out of the platform to utilize in other forms of CAD. So probably the last thing I'd like to discuss here is that we do have a mobile-friendly version of the platform that we generated that makes sharing this information into the field, whether it's with site superintendents, project management, equipment operators, does not matter, that we're calling crew. The idea being to get this into the hands of the crew. And so if I come back into the Designs tab, and I want to turn those lot plans on, and then I come back into the Measurement tab, and I turn on, let's say, I do the January stockpiles once again, and then I do the south block here. This will allow me to turn on these files. I come into the crew tab, and I actually have the ability to generate a crew link from here. And what this is going to do is it will create a mobile-friendly version of the platform, two-dimensional, really easy to use, but still maintains all of the metadata and all of the surface data that will allow you to spot check things like utilities, surfaces, and turn on any of those measurements within the platform. So as this loads here, I click into this. It will allow me to, you'll see once again who it was generated by, when was it generated. Anyone who's on a cell phone would be able to scan this right here. Anyone who wants to send it as an email can copy the link, or a text message can copy this link to the clipboard. A lot of my customers will actually print the QR code and hang it in the job site trailer. So it's meant to be very simple, very straightforward, very easy. Any of the measurements that I've turned on here, I can simply click into, and we're going to be able to get the volumes of cut fill. We're going to be able to get the volumes of the stockpiles that we've turned on, things of that nature. If I come up into this symbol for measure elevation here, I can click on this, and I can drag this anywhere on the map, and it's going to give me what my elevation is to the hundredths place. Now, in the event that you do spot a utility conflict of anything or anything of that nature on the site, we actually have created a drawing tool here that will allow you to make note of that. So let's say the trenching in this particular area doesn't align with the design files that we're doing. I can easily do this, and this is live. And so anyone who has this link is going to see me making these markups, and once the markup has been addressed, you can erase it, or for users who are on their cell phones, you'd be able to actually see what looks like a paper airplane symbol here. You could click this link and text this out with the caption utility conflict or incorrect trenching area and things of that nature. And so once again, the idea is that we've democratized this survey data and made it in a way that everyone in the field, everyone in the office, everyone on the surveying, the project management, the estimating teams can all have access to the most up-to-date information at the same time and allow you to make actionable decisions on your site in a way that you never would be able to do with traditional surveying methods. Hey guys, so obviously we'll field the Q&A at the end, but I think one of the last things worth discussing here, why invest in drone surveying? So on the left-hand side of the screen, 10 times faster than traditional methods, and I think that that's putting it lightly. I think that's totally dependent on the type of site you're working on. You know, to the examples I discussed earlier, you can frequently see much more than 10 times as quickly. 10% of the traditional surveying costs, once again, depending on the site, but this is something a lot of our customers are seeing a ton of return on value on. And then utilizing that workflow that we discussed, 1/10 of a foot accuracy every time you fly. And that's site-wide, not just at single individual checkpoints. So the industry is changing. The reality is that drone hardware has finally caught up to expectations and can finally produce usable services. Surveying is a diminishing trade. You know, I'm a millennial myself. I'm in my 30s, but I know that when I was in college, there were fewer and fewer people studying surveying. It was much more difficult as we got out of school to find people who were willing to assume those roles. But the needs are ever growing. And I think everybody within the construction industry is moving towards the connected work site. And what I mean by that is, you know, the ability to share the information among yourselves and not have to worry about, you know, project delays and things of that nature from lack of communication. So a bit more personal, once again, the Propeller promise, accuracy over everything. You know, we started as a hardware company and then pivoted to a software company because we saw that that was a need that wasn't being met in the industry. So accuracy over everything, 24/7 support for every single customer. And then finally, purpose-built tools that we just showed off in that video that are going to solve progress tracking and earthwork problems, which was the whole purpose of today's webinar. So at this point, I think we can open it up to questions. I believe, Mackenzie, I'll let you take it back over.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. Let's jump into the questions now. We received some of these during the presentation, and some of them were submitted before, so there'll be a nice mix of both. So for the first one, who is typically in responsible charge of volume surveys in the U.S., licensed surveys or licensed engineers?
So in our experience, what typically ends up happening is the licensed surveyors are responsible for the data collection, but project engineers and project management teams are responsible for the gathering of that information once it's been collected by the surveyors. Obviously, you still would need a surveyor stamp of approval to get that as a licensed survey, but this is a great way, in the interim to get all of that information. So a combination of the two is the answer to that question.
Perfect. Our next question, which are the best techniques to mitigate the risks on earthwork projects and align the stakeholders?
I think just frequency. On a lot of these projects, using traditional surveying methods, things can get really outdated really quickly. I know I have customers that I'm working with who fly every single day, but I'd say most fly every project every single week. And it's not only giving you the visual representation that can be shared with project owners and stakeholders, but also the topographical information that project management and operations teams need to work from.
Okay. Our third question, what's the training and support like? Does this person need to have a technical resource on staff to manage this?
So I can't speak to every single company out there, but at Propeller, every single one of our customers has a dedicated customer success engineer that's responsible for all of the onboarding, so getting you guys up and running with the not only data collection methods, upload, but also platform use. And then on the actual customers end, you absolutely do not need a technical person. Typically, it's a member of the survey team or a project engineer or just someone on staff who's visiting the sites. The only thing that is required is pilots have to have a Part 107 in order to fly on the site. But 60-question test, multiple choice, costs $150 to get licensed. It's super straightforward. And then from there, we handle all of the training and have a super robust kind of, I guess, Propeller U is what we call it. It's like a university of resources that you guys can access at any moment.
Okay. Next question. Do I realistically need to plan to fly to make sure everything is aligned?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's totally dependent on your project and what you feel comfortable with. But I think the reality of the situation is that drones are here to stay, and they're only going to get better and more robust. And it provides you with things that a traditional survey is not capable of providing you with. And so I think 2 to 3 years from now, you will see a drone on every single construction work site. And I think anyone who's looking to implement now is, we've been around for 7 years. We have had customers around that entire time, but people who implement now could still be considered early adopters. And that, in another 2 or 3 years, every single person is going to be utilizing this technology.
Okay. Next question. Is it possible to use only quadricopters or UAV airplanes can be used too? Not sure if I said that right.
Yeah, so quadcopters is what we showed off in the imagery there, like a Phantom 4 RTK. We can use fixed wing technology, but the actual processing that we do on our end, you can't do, from thousands of feet in the air with a plane. Like, it does need to be a drone, but we can incorporate data from, whether you're using the Wingter 1 or the EB or the Quantum. If that's the question, like we are able to utilize fixed wing technology as well.
Okay, perfect. Let me see. Are you using a single drone or several possible to finish the project faster?
So the thing with our particular workflow is that we have to have that Aero point data that we were discussing, those smart ground control part, has to be running concurrently, and it can only apply to a single like a single flight from a single drone at any one time. And so you can't do multiple flights of the same site with separate drones. But again, it's very quick and very economical, especially with some of those fixed wing options. The example I talked about earlier in the presentation, where our solar project customer had a 2,500 acre site, they ended up going with the Wingtra and actually had the total flight time for 2,500 acres was 5 hours and 59 minutes.
We have time for one more question. Are you using LiDAR technology to collect points or something else?
So the underlying technology that Propeller uses is photogrammetry. And so when we were looking at that point cloud there, what we were actually looking at was every single pixel from every single image that was generated by the drone flight is then a point is created from that. And so from there, we utilize that point cloud that we've generated from the aerial imagery to create surface data that we were showing there in the platform. So we do have the capability. Obviously, there are a lot of LiDAR drones on the market. We can ingest and host that data, but the processing that we're doing is photogrammetrical.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you so much for sharing with us. That was super informative. And for all of our attendees, thank you for attending today's webinar. Tips and tricks for leveraging drone tech for optimal Earthworks project management, brought to you by GPS World and our sponsor of the event, Propeller Aero. If we were not able to answer your questions during the presentation or Q&A session, your questions will be forwarded to the panelists to be addressed via email. If you have any additional questions for myself or for our speaker, you can reach out to us directly via the email addresses you see on this slide. The resources panel houses a PDF of today's presentation slides, which you can download. To access this panel, if it is not visible, please click the green icon at the far right end of the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. A recording of this webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow as well and posted to gpsworld.com/webinars. Upcoming webinars from GPS World also will be posted to that page. Thank you all for attending, and we hope you'll join us for another great webinar.
Thank you, everyone.